ended the last show saying I was going to talk about difficulty curves, so this week we're going to be talking about this. Now, one admission before we actually dive headlong into this. Because of the show topic, I was going to call this show Making It Harder, but then in my mind's ear I heard the internet collectively go, hur, 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 hur. See, this is why we can't have nice things. I've said it before, the MMO Defiance has become an example, at least to me, on how to get a game totally wrong. With DLC 5 and its numerous patches, they've attempted to solve one of their so-called problems, mainly the complaint that the game was too easy. Now, this isn't the first time I've heard this. In fact, I think just about every MMO in existence has been called too easy, usually by a very vocal community of hardcore players. World of Warcraft immediately comes to mind because I hear players constantly longing for the days of vanilla WoW, but I hear the same thing about every MMO in existence. The old days were just better because the game was harder and it took more skill. You can't see it, but on my script those words are in quotations because, okay, nobody's ever been able to explain to me what makes a game more difficult without them coming off as sounding like they're just whinging about it. And the thing is, at least to me, I don't think they quite comprehend what they're asking for. Defiance has been trying to make the game more difficult well before DLC 5, and they were doing this with something I lovingly called the clown car effect. You just simply add more enemies and the game gets harder. It's a very fast solution that doesn't take much to implement. I mean, an individual player's ammo is limited, but since there's more bad guys, you're stretching them thinner, and it supposedly makes you play better. Well, with DLC 5, Defiance went the full World of Warcraft model of buff the bad guys on top of the clown car tactic. 5 times the enemies with 10 times the hit points each. It's the typical response to the "this game is too easy" rally cry. On one hand, it does make the game more difficult. If I can only produce X number of damage and each enemy takes X times 5 damage to take down, yeah, granted, I'm going to have a hard time doing it. On the other hand, this really isn't making the game more difficult as much as it makes it annoying. I think that's actually a really big problem here, is that amping up the enemies does not make the game harder. We all know the player is going to win anyway, so you're just making the fight 5 times longer than it needs to be, and you're not adding any difficulty, just time. But it's the fast solution when the forums are filled with hardcore players whining that the game is too easy. The thing is, I can't get a straight answer as to what makes a game too easy, according to the hardcore gamer crowd. You have to read between the lines and it's a lot of anger and hate to get to the main points, but I think I've got a handle on some of them. A game is too easy when it handholds the player and tells them what to do. A game is too easy when everyone can win. A game is too easy when everyone can make it to end content and beat the end game bosses. There are some variations in the theme, but I think you kind of get the idea on this one. Now, I've thought about this for a while and I've come to one conclusion that I really don't like, but it makes the most sense to me. This has absolutely nothing to do with the difficulty of the game. It has everything to do with the hardcore player's ego. Almost all of the hardcore players I hear pining for the old days when the game was harder really don't want the game to be more difficult. Most of them were carried through dungeons at one point or another, or they installed an add-on that tracked quests so they knew where to go, and they would scream at their screen at the cheap shot the boss had to wipe the whole party. And all the while, they would extol about how vanilla WoW was the best game, or vanilla whatever. What I think they're actually missing is the exclusivity of the old days. In the old days, you had to know a guy who knew a guy to find a decent online MUD, and even World of Warcraft, way back in the day, it was pretty obscure. Game developers had to make the game more accessible to non-geeks so they could keep their game going, and this was seen as dumbing the game down, when in reality, it just made the game more understandable to those people not familiar with MMOs. In all honesty, it has all of the hallmarks of being pure arrogance. I mean, I've been called an entitled casual player before, but this is entitled hardcore players, because these people are demanding that the game be catered to them, made more difficult for them, so they can have their exclusive tree clubhouse back. Which might explain about all the whinging, too, because they don't get to feel so special because everybody can win the game now. But honestly, you guys really don't want the game to be more difficult. Let me take a step back here and let's talk about difficulty. As I said, when players say they want the game to be more difficult, I don't think they know exactly what they want. Defiance is going full bullet sponge mode, and it made the game more difficult, sure, but players disliked it for the most part, even though the difficulty was ramped up, just like they asked for. So I don't think that these guys want difficulty. If they did, I can just point at some simple games that have a really good ramping difficulty they can try. Simon. Simple game, really. I mean, just watching me play this, you can probably figure out the basics. The difficulty comes from the pattern speeding up, and it adds a new piece every time. The old game had a time limit too, which just made it that much harder. Now, the classic game has a no-win condition in it, so you just keep going until you fail. There's no ending, there's no reward, you just play to see how far you could get. This actually kind of leads me to wonder if difficulty is even what these players really want. It may be that the players want a more challenging and rewarding experience, not really a difficult one. Back to Simon. The reward is beating your old score and pushing your personal skills. Modern games have an ending, so that's your reward. You get to the end, you win the game, achievement, go drive the game back to GameStop before midnight. Now, MMOs have a problem here. They need to keep people playing after they beat the game. MMOs do this with ongoing end content. You play to end content to get more powerful gear to make the end content easier, which makes you get more powerful gear to beat the end content. After a while, your character can overpower instances and the whole experience becomes less challenging. By giving people more powerful gear to make end content easier, it becomes, ironically, less rewarding. So I don't think the hardcore players want a game that is harder. The fact that they're willing to grind on trash mobs for days, if not weeks, and hoping that they get a better piece of gear or just to earn their way up nickel and diming, yeah, that kind of blows that out of the water. I think they want something that's a little bit more rewarding. And I'm not talking about gear rewarding, I'm talking about emotionally rewarding. But I also think that these guys want to have a challenge. So how do you present something that is both rewarding and challenging without having to completely rework your game? I've got an idea, but come on, let me show you this. Welcome to the Armory. So last time I showed you guys this right at the end of the show. This is an EMAG. It's a paintball gun, marker. Some people get all bent out of shape and politically correct. But anyway, so this is an electronic paintball marker. You can see right there. And it shoots somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 balls per second. Give or take a couple. Now I played with this quite a lot, but not nearly as much as I played with this. This is a stock class Phantom. It's actually a pump action. You have to actually pump it back, roll it forward so the ball rolls into the chamber, and then you're ready to shoot. This gets ready to fire about one ball every second, maybe one every 2 seconds, depending on the kind of day you're having. Now, I also have some mechanical semi-automatics, like this stroker, and I have an A5, A2, but okay, so these get about 9 rounds, 10 rounds per second, somewhere around there. Okay, so you're probably saying, well, what's the big deal? Why are you showing us all your old stuff? Well, in the sake of gaming, I want you to think of it this way. Easy mode, medium, challenge mode. In paintball, rate of fire is king. It's not the ball with your name on it you worry about as much as the 200 behind it marked occupant. To draw a very loose comparison, let's say you were to drop a new player into legendary gear into the starter area and just let them loose. That's what it's kind of like out there sometimes. So what happens when you remove that firepower from an individual, but not from everyone else? In gaming terms, challenge mode. Since the player can't sit back and just rely on raw firepower, you have to go to your other skills. How well can you utilize your teammates? How well can you move and shoot? How well can you plan your moves ahead of time? Meanwhile, the basic game has not changed. The goal is the same, the opponents are the same, you just can't rely on your own personal firepower in a game dominated by firepower. You've just presented yourself with a challenge within the game. And I can't tell you how rewarding it is to play stock class against the electro guns and not only do well, but thrive. Take a drink, right. So here's my thought. Give experienced players a challenge. Now I know World of Warcraft has challenge mode dungeons, but I think they can go even one step further. Allow end-level characters access to challenge mode gear that's at the recommended level of an instance or an area. It's good enough to take care of business, but not so overpowered you just demolish everything. This gear could be standardized for class, but customizable details to allow player style and preference, and just allow the players to run loose in the world with this challenge mode level. Okay, I can already hear people saying, well, why would I want to take a step down? I mean, I worked so hard to get all this gear. Why would I want to do that? Well, what I'm saying is you don't have to do this. It's an optional thing. But the thing is, if you're that good, if you tell me you are that skilled, you shouldn't need high-end gear in order to do this. You know, put your money where your mouth is, that kind of thing. I stopped in the kitchen on the way back here. What? But if you absolutely need external validation, the game can have achievements based on challenge mode play. They can even have gear for each level of instance, such as barely at level, so that you could play new player instances to end content on challenge mode. You make a vanity title for it, you give exclusive rewards like costume pieces and so on. Now this solves a lot of problems for players who say the game needs to be harder, because you get to show off your skills, you get exclusivity by saying I did this on challenge mode, as well as tangible rewards for doing it. Plus, it's optional, so if you just want to go demolish things with your epics, you can still do that. Now, would a game company want to put a challenge mode style play into the game? I would like to think they would, but in reality it would require a lot of work, play testing, and so on, and this means they'd have to sink money into it as a project, and most games won't do this. Now, the cheaper solution is the bullet sponge and clown car tactics, and odds are that's what they're going to go with. On the surface, yes, it does make the game harder, but not in the way that we're asking for this. Look, one message to the game companies out there: there's a difference between making something more difficult, making something more rewarding, and making something punishing. If somebody finishes one of your instances by saying, "Oh, thank you, it's finally over," you have failed. Dog treats everywhere.